Notwithstanding Teddy Roosevelt's statement that, quote, the wolf is a beast of waste and destruction, end quote, the wolf is here to stay. So this hearing is not about eradicating the gray wolf. But the wolf is not going to be reintroduced in every place where it used to be, such as Manhattan Island, Southern California, Denver, Seattle, Baltimore, for example. Why? Because those areas are now filled with people, and there is no longer habitat or prey for the wolf, and of course no one wants to put their children at risk, as is the case, as we heard this morning, in Minnesota. So the burden of returning the nature to, quote, balance, end quote, will not fall on those living in the hills of LA or, in the concrete canyons of New York. Instead, the costs and the risks of harboring an apex predator will fall upon those of us who live in rural America. But this does not mean that we who live in rural areas must silently accept the urban imposition of this very real cost of the wolf. No, we do not have to accept this any more than the law requires. What I'm saying is we do not have to accept any more wolves than the absolute minimum necessary to meet the requirements of the Endangered Species Act. And we need to be able to control the population of wolves so that minimum number is not exceeded. To do this, we must know how many wolves the ESA requires. And in my mind, the answer is enough to maintain its survival as a species and no more. Secondly, we must have the wolf removed from the ESA's list of endangered creatures. Why? Because if they are on the list, their numbers cannot be controlled. I'm extremely happy to mention that just 2 days ago, the bill to remove the wolf from the endangered species list passed across the floor of the House and is on its way to the Senate. Given that U.S. Fish and Given that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has found that the wolf is no longer endangered, the only surprise in the process of passing the bill was the number of Democrats voting against it. 201 Democrats, all but 4 brave souls, voted to keep the wolf listed. Just 4 out of 205 Democrats voted to delist. This is amazing because unless the wolf is delisted, rural Americans cannot legally act to protect their communities, wildlife, children, and livestock from the horror of being attacked and torn apart by a wolf. Why anyone would vote for a continued needless destruction of vast numbers of deer, elk, and moose, not to mention the livelihoods of hundreds of farmers and ranchers, is beyond me. As we will hear from witnesses today, unmanaged wolf populations have a devastating impact on farmers and ranchers and other wildlife species and the communities that depend upon them. The fact is that wolves are apex predators who rely on killing other animals to survive, whether they are a farmer's cattle or wild moose living out of the forests of Minnesota. The management of wolf populations is the only logical path forward that can strike a balance between maintaining a healthy population and protecting the way of life of so many of our constituents. The good news is that states have already proven to be capable wildlife managers. States, not the federal government. This was confirmed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service 2 months ago when they denied petitions to list gray wolves in the western United States and relist them in the northern Rockies ecosystem, an area where wolves have been delisted for over 10 years. The service stated that wolves, quote, are not at risk of extinction in the western United States now or in the foreseeable future, end quote. The service also stated that wolves in the western United States have a healthy abundance, retain genetic diversity, and the ability to respond to high mortality events and maintain adaptive capacity. Instead of sitting on our hands and allowing the issues associated with an unmanaged wolf population to grow, we as members of Congress must continue to act to ensure the voices of our constituents are heard and that we do everything we can to delist the gray wolf. The action on the House floor this week was one step in the right direction, and I believe this hearing today will continue that path forward. I now recognize Mr. Stauber for an opening statement.